Well, first of all, Christian, thank you so much for screening your films here with us.
Of course.
It was a delight. As I told you before, I've seen some shit here before.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. But it's always nice to see new shit, new stuff. If anything, I'm definitely more a narrative cinema kind of guy, but I do appreciate experimental because it's always great to see the way people play with form and structure. So more often than not, you're either going to see a very long take where probably nothing happens, when there you're just going to see the madness where it's like, and then someone in the back is like, oh my God, I can't see this anymore. I'm going to cover my eyes. But I like how yours does kind of straddle that fine line where sometimes it veers slightly into close to overload, but not quite. And I like how more often than not it stays in this liminal space where it's not quite uncomfortable, but a bit of unease in a good way. So I like that. And I see you create these worlds, these characters, where they inhabit their own reality. But at the same time, it feels, at least in some instances, it feels voyeuristic, like we're definitely peering into their lives instead of just watching a film, especially some of the later ones, which I found very intriguing. And I guess first of all, one question that I have is, so most of these were made during film school, right?
Yeah.
But a few of them after.
Yeah.
So well, I guess first of all, how did you get into film? Like, why film?
I mean, like, I've been part of it since, like, way back in preschool. It was some more of, like, it kind of started, like, an annoyance in my life. So my best friend at the time, he wanted to, like, really do film and would just, like, force me to act with them. I kind of hated it. But, like, he just, like, forced me more and more into it. I'm just like, you know what? Like, screw up, just try and make my own movie. I did. It was, like, more so, all, like, weird curiosity. I kind of just want to, like, build Legos when I was growing up. That's just what I wanted to do, really. But then like I done these like little science videos and like they're not like high class. There's like John Cena. It's like it's made by a middle schooler. But like however, it's like I noticed like I'll never forget one of them I showed in class and like it became so popular. I remember like watching like everybody seeing it, and even like people that like said flat to my face that they hated me, like loved my video. I see him like laughing and like genuinely like enjoying it, and like that was kind of like probably the moment where it clicked in that like I really want to do it since like growing up I always struggled with like verbal communication, especially coming from like a Soviet family who had to learn English when they moved over to the States. Then we moved over to Canada. That like and multiple speech therapists, it's like it's always been like difficult for me to communicate through verbal. And so like film was kind of an easy way to kind of just like jump over those like conversations and like bonding experiences and just like say them straight with like images and like sound. And like over the years I guess like just got like more and more corrupted of just like what I go with it and how much I stretch forward and fully bended, because I think like Cat was probably one of my like last like more normal movies. I made that like right after like high school. Like I was wanting to do something about my cat passing away. Then like Lyft texted me in the middle of the day or something. It's like, Chris, I'm bored as shit. Can we make a movie? I'm like, yeah, sure. And so like we just like fully like arranged like that together. And like I actually had a conversation with Connor just talking about, or because we did a lot of stuff together during this period too. And kind of like what we kind of compare is that like back then it's like I wanted to do like serious stories underneath like all the weirdness and whatnot. And I think Cat's like one of the very few that actually achieves that looking back. While like later on right now, especially just war times, it's like it's a lot less like pretentious, it's a lot more fluid. And like I feel like in that sense, even though I do like the immaturity of my very earlier work, and I think it's their strength, I do prefer the maturity and just like the non-self-conscious of what I do now.
Thank you. Interestingly enough, one thing that I felt throughout the work that I really enjoyed, whether the more mature or the more playful, there seems to always be this sense of irreverence, like a little bit of unhingedness, a little bit of madness going on, which I enjoy. And the first film, Cat, it's so funny because we had a screening while back that also dealt with someone just showing up to someone's house dressed as a cat, like full cat. Yes. And I'm thinking, and that film, to be fair, definitely had a little bit more of that furry undertone.
Right.
No diss to anyone. But so I was seeing this one and I'm like, but it's interesting because again, it's this interesting substitution. Only the protagonist is more resistant to this interloper, but at the end, at some point, they give in. So I'm very curious, and because you mentioned that this film was also a way of processing your cat passing, so which wow, now I'm reimagining again the scene where the bloodied bugs, and I'm like, oh shit. But I'm curious. So that's an example of real life doing a little bit of inspiration to your work. Does your other works also take inspiration from real life, other works of art, other movies, or just random musings that just
I mean, what isn't like inspired by anything that's personal? And like, I feel like for me, it's like that's probably been like the biggest thing I kind of hurl around since like a lot of like the high school stuff, especially. I kind of look back and just like cringe profusely of like how like unsubtle it was, like based on like personal life or just like try to reframe situations. And like, I kind of just want to blow my brains out watching those, so I'm gonna stop talking about those. And like, I mean, like I sort of feel like that's always like kind of like my start point with any ideas that something about me or just something like personal or like at least my like thoughts and emotions, and that kind of like circle like stories and like characters around that. I feel like projects that like, because I do pitch a lot, I do try like get a lot of things done. I feel like the ones that actually make it to see the light of day are the ones that are very reflective of what's going on in my life right now. Tickle Tickle, despite my personal mixed opinions about that film, it's like me like starting growing up, then like war times, just like as I said during the beginning, like all of my 4 years in class last. So it's like it's always been like my very first like inspiration, but I've been like admittedly a lot more cautious and careful about it since I always want to approach it from like a more mature angle, and especially the sort of what I want to start do now is that like I'm kind of bored like talking about myself. And like today, especially just like here and just hanging out with like a lot of my close friends, hearing them talk more and more about their lives, it's like I kind of realized that like I'm sort of a lot more interested in them. I'm taking more inspirations like from them and craft stories around that. So that's sort of the biggest thing I kind of want to push now past the war times.
thank you. Which is interesting because I definitely felt a little bit of that, a mixture between self-referential but also telling other people's stories, which is interesting. Analog. What is the interest with analog? What does analog allow you to do with film that digital doesn't, or that it complements digital?
I mean, I think for me, just that I like that forces me to work smarter. And like, especially where I got like my editing inspiration to begin with is like, especially with my one of my first films, Girls Night, is that like I was inspired because I was like kind of stunned like how I'm gonna like edit this film. It was my first like big like abstract like analog piece. And like I remember like filming with Connor and like he would rewind the May DP tape, have to see it back. It starts off with like a blue screen. I don't know what the hell are gonna actually like pause on. And they have to like pause it like, at the very right time. You tape it over, stuff you filmed for like 5 months ago, like show up for like 1 second. And that was kind of the start point like right there. And I feel like because I worked with like the Black Magics and like wherever like high professional like red cameras and like they don't really inspire anything for me editing wise. And like I always love films that like have like the camera or like the very act the editing as like a third character telling its own perspective. I feel like that's like very much a character that like a lot of film like just like forgets about and like lacks. And I feel like it's so important to create a new perspective from it. I think that what makes a lot of films like refreshing if they acknowledge editing as its own separate character. And so like I found with analog technology, especially shooting on Super 8 and 16 millimeter, it's like I get a lot quicker just like how I want to edit the film, just based on that experience, especially with like film where you're basically editing in the camera and making sure that like everything's tied well. There's all like the mannequins above it. Like you fucked up the wrap and the Bolex. I'm gonna swear a lot. Sorry. You're gonna like fuck with like the wrap and like the Bolex. It's gotta get tightened in. You have to cut it off and like you're gonna find that somewhere when you're in post production getting it ready. Like I think I'm always gonna do some digital with posts. I don't want to touch the Steam Deck. I never want to touch that thing because I love like the full freedom of Premiere and like DaVinci and like what allows to like beyond that and exhalate.
Mm. No, that's fair. And there's definitely something to be said about how film, now that it's become niche, it's its own thing. It's become an artifact, just like the camera. Like before, this sucker would be behind doors just so no one could hear it. Nowadays, it's like, ah, yes, the sound of the camera. So it's weird how things are transformed just with the passage of time and how we use them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's because also it's like we've tried so hard to right now to make cameras look so perfect, and like it's kind of like ruined the fact of like what makes it interesting is those like little like mistakes and like imperfections. I think my favorite like David Rimmer quote is like, when I get bored, I just look at the scratches, and like you're finding like other like like entertainment value and like other like layers of like content for somebody to look at, especially with the texture of the film. Where I feel like if you shoot some like clean digital, and like I'm not someone who's like anti-digital. I just see I film so many things on digital, and like I love early digital. Like Michael Mann, especially, I think is one of the best filmmakers to use early digital. Growing up was like Collateral, Miami Vice, but also with like cameras, I'm just like hate that like it makes it so easy just to like record and get stuff on, and like it just like looks like so crisp, and like I found without the mistakes, without the things that like annoy us about like film cameras. Like it's cool, but also it's a pain in the ass to shoot 60mm at Super 8. Is that like those headaches like also create the characters within the image.
Yes. That's one thing that I always find fascinating, how with film you have to be more involved. And even then, despite what part of the process you're doing, something can always happen that suddenly the image is not crisp, perfect, clear. Suddenly little artifacts and whatnot. And it is fascinating because a lot of people treat that as part of the film, as part of what gives it its interest and allure, instead of just, as you say, the perfect image. Many times when you are left only with a perfect, crisp, clear image, it better be well damn composed and something interesting happen, because otherwise it's like, okay, it's an image. But to complement the image, there's the editing. And I noticed that there's a very frenetic way to edit in many of your films. And can you tell us a little bit about that? Like how it makes me feel that some of it is even rhythmical, but I'm curious.
We have very short attention spans, and people say that like as a way to make us say we're growing dumb, but I see the exact opposite. We're just getting better at just like processing knowledge a lot more faster, and like information, which is why slow burn. I'm gonna bully slow burn a little bit here. Doesn't really work in this day and age, since like we're pretty smart knowing what you're doing with the film, where it's going, and so the pull is stretched further and further is just annoying. The last one I seen that did that well was A Violent Nature. As a Canadian slasher film that's just like you just see this Jason Voorhees figure just walk through the forest and maybe kill somebody in the next like 30 minutes, and it's like at least like the costume looks cool, and it's in like BC like forest like scenery, so it's gonna look beautiful constantly. And when it gets to violence, it's like the most like insane shit you have ever seen in your life. So it's like I feel like it's a good balance. And one of my mentors, Carl, who's in the audience right now, probably the best advice I was like given was that like conflict is like not within like the actual story itself. That's like the very baby step first. It has to be like within the actual edits and characters and like style and like the conflicts of sound side conflicts with one another. It just edits so fast. There's a conflict the next scene where it's like super slow. It's like advice that I wish that like I was given by directing prompts like for the first like 2 years before my very last year I was given that. Since like especially war times kind of like completely changed everything, sort of like how I went on during picture lock and getting the sound ready for that. So it's like I guess to answer your question mainly is that like I just simply tried my best to focus on just terms of conflict of each other, and like if the next scene is going to be far different than the last one. And like also like one of my main inspirations, I'm gonna butcher his name horribly, but Haruka Ono. He's a Japanese filmmaker who's best known for Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, did Shin Godzilla, Shin Kamen Rider. He's like one of my all-time favorite filmmakers and probably the best editor. My favorite editor, at least, might go to for inspiration, because his stuff is just you get it straight away. And he does very slow burn stuff, especially the very later half of Evangelion. But like it's just like in those special first moments. And like I hope to get at least like that good of level of like editing like someday, because I'm always like so envious whenever I see a new film from him.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting how conflict arising from the editing and what follows from scene to scene. And I guess I'm always curious because editing is a great part where you make the film.
Yeah.
So I like the contrast between Cat, which does have moments of frenetic editing, but some images, some scenes that do take longer, whereas the others is just like ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. And there is truth about how we're able nowadays to process more information more quickly.
Yep.
Which on the flip side can make it harder when you're watching a scene where there's suddenly like a 10-minute shot and you're like... So, do we have any questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Hi. So I notice, and I do know this from experience, but you work with a lot of the same actors and people, have a repetitive cast, which I'm curious, what benefits do you find with doing that, or why is that an integral part of your process, it seems, to have repeat actors or repeat people that you work with?
I mean, the cold hard troops, that is so much more easier for me to write if I have somebody cast in my brain like straight away. And also it's like people that like, because especially with like directing new actors, it's always such a lengthy process. You're either going to be together or like you're just going to like have a messy breakup like straight after with like working with like new actors. And like it's just like it's a lot more safer too, especially if you kind of want to get a project done like ASAP. It's like you already have these like, because it is like a very intimate like process of director and like actor, and like I feel like knowing people already that I work with so closely, it's so much more comfort for me straight away versus like a new actor and like I have to tell them that this weird shit's actually cool and they should be a part of it, go full send for it. So like yeah, no, it's total truth that like if I do want to work with more and more actors and want to really expand my category there, but it's like especially if you already know people that you work with like constantly for so much, like most of these movies start like Soleil because like because we both have very much an agreement of what art is and know each other very personally. And a lot of actors too like Liv from More Times, Liv from Cat, who's in the audience right now as well. And like and also Jacob, who's also my composer for various other projects, who's attended as well. So it's like, and especially also speaking of Jacob, turns of also that's kind of like also goes in other stuff I'm casting for, especially crew and like especially music, because it's like Jacob's kind of one of the only few people where it's like I can be comfortable with how illiterate I am with music theory. Like we'll be like composing like random shit like and it's like at its place, and like I kind of like look at it like edited movie. I'm just like, okay, so like the bouncy stuff here sounds pretty rad, but maybe just a little less on the bouncy, more on the low end here. Like I just learned what like high tops were. So it's like, and to go about the cast of things, also just the complete work around that. But like, of course, I do have to like push myself more in terms of like my pure collaboration. But like, I also love just sticking to like whatever people are available to those people, because it just makes the process run so much more smoothly.
Good. Yes, thank you. No, and if I may add, I think an advantage of also collaborating with the same people, it's already people that you trust, that you already proven to each other, that you can work together, that you kind of know what each other requires from the other. And with acting itself, of course, being that intimate process where suddenly if there's already previous work, previous history, it can be a little bit easier. But, and at the same time, it's nice to work with the same people, you know? I mean, I'm thinking of famous directors, Akira Kurosawa. How many movies with Toshiro Mifune? I mean, they kind of had a falling out at the end, but that's another story. But still, you know, if you have a solid crew, I think it's important to be able to get out there and meet new people, new cast, new crew. But it's good to have that core group of people that you can rely on, that you can count over and over again to develop new projects. Because even if it's the same face, the project will be different. The result will be different. So I like that. Any other questions? Yes, please.
So, when you have a script and all of that's ready, and when you bring people on board for the crew part of it, how do you get people on the same wavelength as you, or at least somewhat of a similar wavelength when the ideas are very abstract?
I just leave them horribly confused. That is usually my preferred methods. And especially with because I mean kind of like how these get them on board. It's honestly just pure aesthetic reasons. Because they'll think the movie looks cool and sounds cool, and that what basically just gets people on board and ready for it. And then while we're going for it, I had so many moments with my buddy Logan, who DP'd War Times, who's a part of this, where it's people asking what the movie means. It's I have no fucking idea. You have to go talk to Christian about it. I have no clue. And I remember one time I was working with my sound designer for War Times, Enrique, and we're just doing neural sound stuff, and he usually will pause the film at very specific times. I tell him what notes. We're just watching through one scene, and he just abruptly pauses it out of nowhere, not in cue, and he's Christian, what is this about? What is this? Full on confrontal about it.
What the fuck?
And keep in mind, we've already done 90% of sound design, and he just asked me this just now. So we had it. So I just get kind of because to be honest, it's maybe I'm a bit of an asshole for doing this, but I don't like to give all my cards out. Of course, with acting it's different. I have to go inside out to make sure it's the ideal performance. But for crew, I see Connor just giving me just the glare eye right now when I talk about this. But it's I find when you're working with people that are just so horribly confused, they're honestly just so much more creative. Because it's they're just okay, how do I make this more sense to other people? And that's usually been my preferred method, but I kind of learned to just stop being such a prick about it for shits and giggles. But it's but usually it's a good sign if they're just they're trying to make sense of it, because now they're just more focusing on just doing their absolute best job at that.
Nice. Well, I would have to say, kudos to you then, that despite the confusion, they keep coming back. So they're either masochist or your vision is inspiring. And again, I see the work right now and I'm I dig it. Yeah. So even if it's just the texture, even if it's just an aesthetic, I think you are already creating a very unique cinematic language with your own style and flair. So I'm actually curious to see how that grows and how you want to tell your stories or other people's stories. So even the last film, which I know is a little bit of a commentary of your film school. And I'm because I'm thinking, okay, wank fest, but self-referential wank fest, and at the same time, fuck this. But you know what? It's pretty. And I'm yeah, this is film school. I've been to film school, so. No, thank you for that.
Oh, no worries.
Do we have another question? Just Glenn?
Yeah, I'm really curious, what the script for one of these movies would look like.
Any peyote?
It depends on the film. I mean, Diet Coke Queen, I kind of had my brain off. I was just made that just ball and straightforward. I think it turned out pretty well. But for for a more serious film War Times, going back to that, it's there's a script, believe it or not, and a lot of rewrites. Slay will complain to you about that. I think there've been 10 rewrites for War Times. And just the thing about it though is that especially with film school, it's I kind of had to cheat with it, since we had to meet a certain because I wanted to do pre-written dialogue originally, and I swear it became an improv director by mistake, because it's the dialogue I'll fill in will be way more than 6 pages. So I just lift the dialogue for when we're rehearsing and doing the real thing, you know. So there is scripts you evolve. Probably the most detailed has been Darkman, where we follow that pretty much beat by beat. And of course storyboard, my drawing skills are a brain damaged 5-year-old. I'm not very good at it, but I'm getting better visualize it. I remember Carl he read the script for War Times before signing up being my mentor, and he also looked at the storyboards
And like I remember he was like, here's my notes for Dwayne Christian, and I said great things. Like, yeah, sure. Then like I read it, and like the first paragraph is, once I saw those two things, I had like no hope for the student.
Inspiring.
Straightforward. So it creates a rough like first like impression, but it's like, especially for me, like it helps me like mentally to like shot list it and like and to get at least like visually like fully like ready and straightforward. And like at that point it's like I'm sort of on set on both like director and editor, like focusing like on every single detail and like basically just thinking how I'm gonna edit the movie while I'm like directing, while also dealing with performance. And like I don't want to admit it, but also like have to deal with like producer stuff too, do like independent things and like whatnot. So like it varies, but it's like probably the most like traditional thing about my work is that I am like a huge prep freak.
Good.
Like I do like want to spend a bunch of times like rewriting, planning out shots, illustrating storyboards like specifically as well, because it just makes me more comfortable knowing what to do. Because like especially with directing, it's like if you find you're doing most of your job directing like on set instead of during prep, it's like you fucked up. Like it needs to like majorly be always like during like prep.
Pre-prep is production. Pre-production is
Yeah.
production. And the more prepared you are, suddenly you don't have to just fumble about and be like, what the fuck, what the fuck? What the
Yeah.
fuck? Never been on sets like that.
Oh, of course it hasn't.
Yeah. But you know, it's interesting because I see your style and you're walking us through a little bit, thank you by the way, through your process. And one thing that I do feel very strongly is how a lot of it feels very intuitive, like a very intuitive way of making films, you know?
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see how you bring it forward. And I guess one question I would have to ask related to that, of these projects, especially the most recent ones, what do you think or what do you see about yourself that you have learned as a filmmaker that you are going to bring forward into future projects?
That's really good. I think like the main thing is just like how I do alternative storytelling. Like I never really consider myself to be like a experimental avant-garde like filmmaker. If I get compared to like David Lynch one more time, I swear to God. But like I just like I always just see my stuff, and I still believe to this day, we're gonna laugh, but like I still believe to this day Wartime is probably the most like cohesive film I've made in like years.
I can see
Like
that.
solely like through that, and like especially with the editing style, just like how I tell stories and like characters like through that. It's like I've been wanting to do something a lot more just like character focused, since that's always been my favorite parts of my films. So the whole like rapid, insane editing style, admittedly, I kind of like got bored of it pretty quickly. I think like it was like before Winder, which like was about
Like,
4 or 3 months before War Times was officially greenlit, and like it was something that I kind of did as excuse just to like mess around in class that I didn't really enjoy that much for many reasons. And like it became like a sort of running joke where like with the overpresented film that I've edited, and like always like one of the comments was like, and I know who edited it. And like it became sort of like a Pistols like t-shirt at that point. And like there was some where I just like forced it through, and I just like felt like so embarrassed. And like War Times was like probably like, the redeeming factor for me, where it's like that was like probably the most like healthiest I've used that style, because I was like, okay, like people love the Zakharchuk like throw shit, it looks cool, but it's like I want to do something like actually like meaningful with it, and just something that like you can just like not only feel personally, but like you can at least feel something that's like cohesive like throughout, instead of just like fun throwing around, which like again admittedly also was one of the bigger strengths during the later stages. But it's like I do want to be just like a lot more just like stronger, just character focused, and it's like that's something I do generally love exploring and writing constantly. And then especially everything I make after Wartime is going to be completely different because of that, much more new. And I don't want to say a more traditional or commercial direction, but like at least it's going to be very much a lot more clear who you're following. It's just their world, you're going to have no fucking idea what's going on.
new project, 30-minute short film with the camera on, the lamps cap on.
Let's cap on.
Yep. There you go.
Now, I've been pitching a film festival called Censor Fest. Me and Logan were pitching it, where it's just like you make movies, but you take off the lens and you just shoot with the camera sensor nonstop.
Oh God,
I would love to do that at some point.
I died. Do we have any more? Yes, please.
So,
Yes, no.
all of the films have a running sort of, or most of them, have sort of this a creative use of masks. Can you explain your sort of like draw and the appeal of like masks and masked characters and like creatures, I guess, created through masks?
I mean, like, yeah, no, that's something that like I always like because I just relate to masked characters like far more. There's more emotions that I feel out of them and much more expressions than like human faces. I think it started with me doing mask performances. I haven't done that much. Spoilers, but I do play Cat. That was me just
I had a
screeching on the.
feeling.
That's just me screeching on the floor nonstop. But it's like, because like I tried without the mask before and just try like face forward acting and like there's one short I did where I was like an Italian gangster and like it was so bad that like I quit acting for a straight year because I was so embarrassed by it. And then like recently I did like an acting course for my final year of MOPA. I watched my audition tape and like it drove me nuts because my eyes are like darting everywhere all over the place. I hate just seeing just how I react to stuff. And I know I could at least like do a solid job acting, but I just like way too meticulous of how I look like facial wise that like it just like upsets me. So that's the personal side, but I guess like growing up it's like I always been like attracted to masked characters a bit more excited, like of course G.I. Joe, like Snake Eyes I get hyped for, even Transformers, that's probably been the biggest example where it's like Optimus Prime, I have like the shield mask on, Shockwave, Soundwave, I could go on Transformers nonstop, but I'm gonna stop here. And like especially my favorite performance of all time, I think is still the best performance in cinema is Claude Rains as the Invisible Man. That is my favorite performance ever because he just goes, you sympathize him so much before he becomes a complete lunatic, and like he's generally still so frightened and scary, but yet sympathetic during the beginning, and like he just does it with his body, just his body, and it's like his pure voice, and like that just imagines with what's like underneath the face and what he's expressing, and I find that like forcing you to like make the emotions like yourself when a character's wearing a mask is like gets you a lot more like intimate with them and a lot more thrilled. And I always believe that masks are a way for somebody to express themselves like personally and fully and be free of themselves, and sort of like kind of like that sort of hope that everybody wants where they could just wipe their identity just like clean and just find like start fresh. And like I think masks are kind of like the closest thing we can get to that.
It gives you an opportunity to inhabit someone else.
I mean, just have it yourself fully, just be free.
So you're a cat. There you
Yeah, no, precisely.
go. Nice. Yes, please.
So, Christian, we all know that your films are very deeply personal. They do. But what I'm really curious about is if there's anything in particular that you've like learned making any of these films that's carried on into your own life outside of film.
Yeah, I think that depends because it's like, I think kind of go back to what I was saying earlier where it's like, I kind of just like, because wartime has been me just coming fully at peace myself and everything that I've gone through where it's like, I kind of just become like exhausted just talking about myself, and it was more invitations now to just explore like other people's lives and just hearing them out, especially just like, again, like today, just like talk to so many of my friends that I haven't seen like in ages, and just like going like back and forth has been like just like a personal like moving thing where it's like I kind of just like stupid would be like very over dramatic. I'm not like shaming myself like for it, but it's like it's sort of just like it just felt like redundant that like I've just been focusing like so much like on myself, and a lot of my very like personal like passion projects are like still deeply personal, and I'm trying to like rewrite them in a sense where like it feels from like a full like third like fuller like perspective. And like especially with like earlier works, like the test footage I did with my friend Liv, that played right after Cat, it's like sort of like was like the fun just like chance to like do that fully. So it's like I guess just to kind of like repeat before is like kind of realize that like I'm just sick talking about myself.
Nice.
Colin, in broadest terms, where do you kind of see the height of your aspirations, I guess? Like, do you kind of hope to stay in the avant-garde and the underground and kind of lurk in the shadows, or do you hope to kind of infiltrate pop and, like, I don't know, mainstream media?
I mean, it'd be corny to say both, but like it's kind of in my blood to be part of the avant-garde and experimental, since like even though I do like admittedly want to like stray away a bit farther away from that, but still keep like a lot of like the angst and like a lot of the creativity like from it. I don't want to like then take the risk to do something I'm completely like not related to and like completely like not experienced in, because that's what happened to my boy Kevin Smith, who has like the most like fascinated like film career, because he did like just that and like just made just movies I'm not a fan of, that I can say that professionally. But like I respect the man for just like going through that anyway, just like how fascinated he is like so open like about that aspect, and like it's been both inspiring but also like a fun like cautionary tale. And like especially being this weird like road right now where like now like I'm branding myself, and like it feels weird branding myself, and like, a lot of people come here and say, oh, we come see Christian behind this personality and like the personality of Christian, and it's like it feels off even doing like photo shoots where I'm like hopping around in like a dumb like bunny mask and like whatnot. So like it is like imitated and like to like go through I guess like this like more like visceral icon, but also it's kind of like exciting what I can use for that power. And I'm hoping at least what I took learning from this like avant-garde phase, whatever I bring up to like the mainstream, is like I kind of want to like develop it into like hopefully something new.
Good. Thank you. Dan, any thoughts?
Well, thanks, Christian. It's always such a pleasure to have you around Cineworks, because you've got real humility and at the same time you're very enthusiastic, you know, and you embrace problems even when they occur, you know, with film development or processing and stuff. And as I'm watching your work, I can't help but think about something I had read, and art historians said that art is not meant to answer questions, but to disorient. And to an extent, some of this is intentionally kind of disorienting and unmaking a bunch of things, right? And now that you've finished film school, you know, one of the questions we ask people all the time is, how do you strike a balance between keeping the macaroni in the cupboard, paying the rent, and staying inspired?
I'm probably like the last person to ask that question. But at least how I did for the last like 4 years, it's like honestly I think just being in a kitchen is like much more valuable than being on a film set, because it's like yeah, like a bad film set is bad, but you can at least like laugh about it and like in the shadows, and just like you're kind of waiting for your turn for other people to do it. But like in a kitchen, the communication is shit, then like it's gonna be hell on earth. Like it's gonna be like a miserable time, and like it's also much more rapid pace and like frantic, where like especially I kind of credit the kitchen for helping my professionalism, because it's like after that point it's like I became kind of like numb to it and numb to kind of stress and pressures. Like it just literally just barely like phases me anymore. So like I kind of wanted to get out of it, but also it's like I weirdly find like a weird passion like into that, despite doing it honestly as a bullshit job for the last 4 years. But like eventually it became something that now I can say I genuinely like enjoy working. And I think that's something that's been like much more beneficial than like outside of like on set. And like honestly I do like doing stuff that's like unrelated, just because like gets me more inspired than when I get back like straight from it. Especially be like unemployed for like a little while and then just like leaving so much free time like drove me nuts, because to really like inspire me to get out of that, then to get right so I can get out of that situation and probably get back to it again in the next like 5 years. So
Thanks. Well, Christian, always a pleasure.
Good.
Always a delight. And thank you everyone as well for coming. And that's a wrap on Christian's part. Thank you very much.